Welcome to our game today, which is a really interesting game between Daniel Naroditsky and Hikaru Nakamura from the 2015 USA Championship. In 2015, Danya was only 19 years of age and he was playing near his all-time highest peak in classical rating. He was just 14 points off of that rating in this game. But here we see in this game, watching from the black side, Hikaru playing a beautiful exchange sac for long-term attacking prospects, and we're going to see how he takes advantage of this in a really beautiful way. Danya started with e4 and Hikaru goes c5. We get knight f3, d6, d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4, knight f6, knight c3, g6, and we get bishop to e3. And here we have the Sicilian dragon variation. And of course, in this, White's plan is just to attack down the H file, and really we'll see a nice move by Danya going f3, blocking off of any knight jumps. The idea here is you want to get your king castled, get your queen on to d3, and then trade off these dark square bishops. We had knight c6 and we get bishop to c4 by Danya. Again, the plan is here to play h4, h5, trade off this pawn, and then with the bishop here, you're pinning this pawn to the king if black castles, which they normally do. This is a very volatile attacking game for both sides. Either side can win. Now in the game we get castles, then we get bishop back to b3, we get bishop d7, we get h4 as expected, h5 by Hikaru stopping the pawn storm, and then we get queen to d2. Now, normally in this position, you will see a move like rook to c1, or sorry, rook to c8, or knight to e5, or knight to a5. But in this game, Hikaru decides to play queen to a5, which is an unusual move, and certainly was at this time. So we get castles by Danya, then we get rook to f to c8, king to b1, which means he can now move this knight and it will no longer be a check. Keeping the king tucked in the corner, he can take with the rook or with the bishop if he trades it off, depending on what way they play. So we get knight to e5, we get bishop to g5. Now the idea normally here is by black is to move the king to f8. Um, Moving the king away and also protecting maybe any long-term knight jumps into this situation later in the game. What we get here is Hikaru's lovely move of rook to c3, and really this is a beautiful exchange sac by Hikaru that completely changes the game from here. A very rare move at this time, and Hikaru and Danya didn't trade off the queens. Now white is slightly better here, but the long-term attacking prospects from Hikaru is these three pawns are not very safe in this corner. And if you can trade off this light square bishop in an in-game, this is a very difficult converting position for white to play. So Hikaru starts off by playing a5, we get a3, then rook to c8, attacking this pawn here, so we get king to b2, and already Hikaru is getting Danya to play to his tune, which is what you want to do in classical chess, isn't it? Now we get king to f8 and knight to e2. Now this is an interesting little moment in the game. We get bishop to b5 attacking this knight, and Danya decides that he wants to move back. That's the best move to go forward, really, because if he decides to move somewhere else, it's not really helping his cause. So he moves back, and Hikaru now plays bishop to a6. So effectively, Hikaru has got a free move, as it were, and got his bishop here to this nice little diagonal line here, which is quite important for his attacking prospects. So we get rook to e1, knight to d7, we get f4 attacking the knight, we get knight to c4 check, and we trade off that light square bishop. Now f5 by Danya, followed by knight to c5, we get rook to e3, trying to give a bit of protection to this pawn long term, because after king to e8 and bishop to f4, we get knight to a4 check. Now we've seen that this knight has got a little bit of a tricky move. It's 1, 2, 3 moves here, and now it is attacking this lone pawn here. So after king back to c1 and bishop to a6 by Hikaru, in this game it was a very high quality game. Hikaru played nearly 98% and Daniel nearly played 91%. But here we see a blunder by Danya, and it seems like a good move. It is e5. Now the reason it's a blunder we're going to see very clearly, because d6, d takes e5, and we have to go rook to d5. Why do we have to go rook to d5? Can you understand why you have to give the exchange back? Because if you take with the bishop, what move can you play with black, which is completely crushing? Give you a moment. Well, it is bishop to h6, pinning the rook to the king, and there's no way of protecting it. You can play rook to e1, but you still don't have to take, because you can play rook to c3, winning the pawn, and now playing something like king to d2. You can play rook to e3, rook to a3, and because of the pin, again you get another free move, and after something like f takes g6, f takes g6 back, and knight to f5, you play knight to c4, and you end up winning the rook. And after everything is played, black is up a piece. So we can see very tricky stuff here altogether. Also to note, in this position, if you played something like f to g6 instead of king to d2, and you played rook to g3 and then played g7, thinking, well, I can get a sneaky queen, well, you can't, because it's actually checkmate. So a very tricky position indeed. So we get rook to e5, giving up the exchange instead, and after the bishop takes, we get knight to c3, taking that pawn, and now all of a sudden the engine is saying it's minus 3.3 for black, and it really is Hikaru's game to win. Now here Danya is desperately trying to make an attacking move, but if we got something like the knight taking this seemingly free pawn here, look at what happens. We get knight to e2 check, can't take because obviously you'd give up another exchange, f6, bishop back, rook to c5, and after knight to e5 and knight to g3, black again is easily winning in this position. In the game we get bishop to f6, after knight to e4, and now knight to f5, we get d3, a lovely little moves, not allowing the rook to take and setting up a check. So we get c3, rook to c5, attacking the knight, and after knight takes, we see, can you find the absolutely devastating move here? It is rook to b5, threatening checkmate. The only way to stop it is to give up your rook for the knight, and it's all over. So what an exciting game that Hikaru played. Beautiful way to give up an exchange and win the game.